Hi Pop-Tarts, I'm going to talk a little bit today about reading your own tarot cards. Now I have done a video in the past about reading your own cards, which I believe was a request, and I think it's one of my videos that's been viewed the most often, so I know it's of interest to a lot of people, so I thought I'd go through some further considerations on this point. First of all, when you get out your deck and you plan on reading your tarot cards with regard to a certain situation, I think it's important always to just take a little bit of time and space to work out if you are in the correct emotional state to do a tarot reading for yourself. I think that you need to be reasonably level-headed to do it. I think you need to be in a good space with regard to how you're feeling about potentially having challenges posed to your way of seeing things, potentially having things come up which might be dark or difficult to deal with, potentially being forced to think about things in a new way and kind of shaking up your own perception. If your ego is very fragile or frail at the time of getting your deck out, or if you're kind of very eaten up by anger and you're still in that very rageful or teary stage of the process, it might not be the best time for you to obtain enough objectivity to get a very clear reading. Now, some people would argue that when you read your cards for yourself, you cannot remain completely objective. There is always going to be a subjective element, and in a sense I agree with that. Okay, it is very difficult to completely walk out of your own body and kind of sit opposite yourself and give yourself a very objective reading. However, I think to the greatest degree possible, you can be objective, with the consideration and the understanding that because you're the one going through it, of course there is going to be a little bit of difficulty with that. You are more entangled, you are more embroiled, you are more enmeshed. That is just the case. But yeah, you can obtain objectivity provided that you are serious about obtaining a degree of distance and objectivity and getting a clear reading which could be useful and which could bring up things that at the moment in your conscious mind you can't see. You know, it's really about wanting to journey and wanting to get deeper and wanting to explore and wanting to really be expansive and challenge yourself. When you're in that very rageful or teary state, or when something has only just happened, it's going to be a lot more difficult to feel that you want to be expansive and that you want to be challenged. At that time, it's more about kind of curling up in a tight little ball and, you know, eventually coming out and realising that you want to heal. If you're delicate, if you're fragile, don't put yourself through a tarot reading in terms of looking for answers. I don't think it's going to be worth the process, because I don't think that it's going to bring anything up that's going to be massively beneficial in the long term. I think it's best to get into a stable place where you feel comfortable that you can be challenged and that your perception can be challenged without you kind of falling to pieces. Another consideration I'd suggest is, have you been practicing and do you have a broad understanding of each card? Now, the thing with this is, what I would say is, if your interpretation of each card is very standardised and very kind of, you look at a card and you only ever think of one thing, and you don't really go out of the box with regard to that one interpretation, then I think you're doing your readings that you're doing for yourself a grave disservice by not branching out and not seeing that every card has at least 3 faces, if not 4, if not 40 or more. There is, of course, a standardised theme or a standardised associated energy with each card, but there are so many different avenues you can go down and so many different avenues you can explore. If you get really honest with yourself and you know that you are kind of, you're going stale with your interpretations of the cards, okay, you look at a card and you only ever think of that one word, or you only ever think of that one main association, then I would suggest that you do a really big refresh before you start reading tarot for yourself, or before you do that next reading for yourself. Start looking for different ways you can interpret each card and really encourage yourself to get out of the box. If you're in the box, then you need to take a sharp knife to it and get the hell out, because I think that it makes your reading so much more enriching and expansive. So let's just do a few examples. Okay, so the Tower card, for example. If you see the Tower card and you always think of destruction and loss, and that's what you think of, you get that overwhelming feeling of like something is just falling to pieces here. And if you find that that's how you always read the Tower card, that you've become stuck with that interpretation, there is really no other way that you see it, then you need to start brainstorming, you need to start doing spider diagrams and really kind of getting out into other interpretations, because there are so many more avenues to explore with the Tower. For example, how about the preventative measures that you can put in place to ensure that certain issues don't arise? That feeling of maintaining your stability and understanding what's important so that disaster doesn't strike. So it's kind of like prevention is better than cure, if you like. You can also think about how to pick yourself up and rebuild after disaster has occurred. You can think about, for example, the strong foundations here at the base of the tower and how that's important in terms of guiding the client, or guiding yourself, sorry, in this case, to think about what really matters, what your priorities are right now, and what is kind of a distraction or what is surplus to your requirement at the moment. So it's really about looking at where you can be strong in your core and what you can actually build. It could also be about looking back at disasters that have befallen you ages ago and thinking about the lessons that you've reaped from that. It could be about inner turmoil rather than outer turmoil. Of course, it looks like a very tangible kind of disaster where a building is literally falling down, but it could be about you feeling that you are unstable in some sense, that you are in free fall in some sense, and you may need to deal with that. I think there's a lot of themes here that can be explored. I think the theme can be explored with regard to when you look at disaster or when you look at difficulties occurring, what is within your control? What can you take hold of in those difficulties, and what's out of your control? For example, here, these people are falling out of a building that's been struck by lightning, so that was out of their control. That was a disaster that befell them completely unbeknownst to them, and it was something that they would wish would never have happened. So we can look at what's out of their control. They cannot look back at that burning building and spend the rest of their lives crying and sobbing their hearts out that building is gone. No, they need to eventually pick themselves up and start rebuilding. So the tower can also be about that duality that we need to experience when we understand what is out of our control, what is a waste of energy to think about, and what's within our control, what's our starting point, where can we place our focus, where it's really going to make a difference. Let's look at another one. Just trying to think of ones that, you know, people do sometimes struggle to get out of the box with, I suppose. Okay, so temperance. Let's think about temperance. Maybe your key idea about temperance is that it means peace and tranquility and harmony and, you know, spiritual calm. But there are many different ways that you can see it outside of that box. For example, I often feel that temperance is about alchemy. It's about mixing your different resources to come up with something new. It's about testing the waters. It's about finding the perfect balance, striking the perfect balance, making something out of the resources that you have available. I also think that temperance can be a lot to do with mental health. It can be a lot to do with finding guidance from your inner voice. It can also be, for a lot of people, about spirit guides and about connection with deity and about divinity and such. I think it can be about the emotional spectrum. I think it can be about making peace with a lot of the pain that you've been through in your emotional past. I think that looking at this angel and looking at how he's standing within the water, which is a metaphor for our emotional depth and for our emotional reserves, and he's actually taking control now of that water and actually guiding it in the way he wants it to be. I feel that can often be a sign of somebody who's extremely sensitive, potentially quite empathic, potentially someone who's quite overwhelmed by their human situation and by their human experience. And I can think it can be sometimes about them needing to take hold, take charge of their emotional experience and really kind of take it under their wing, take it under their control, strengthen up, toughen up, if you like. So these are just different ideas, different ways of thinking about a card, so that when you come across it, when you read for yourself, you don't just go for that one standardised reading, one standardised interpretation. You actually allow yourself to branch out, because the cards have different voices depending on the positions that they're drawn in, depending upon where you are at the time of doing for the reading for yourself, depending upon how intuitively you are drawn to that card as opposed to another card. When you turn over a spread, you will notice that some cards jump the hell out at you and they want your attention first, okay? They've got big messages, whereas others kind of fade into the background or kind of give kind of a gentle guiding element but don't seem to have as strong a voice. So that can be another consideration. The cards around any given card can be a consideration. The way they're aspected in the spread can change their meaning. So if you know that you're just going for that one standard word or that one standard sentence that you associate with a card, you really need to get out of that paper bag and start thinking on a much more expansive level, and that will give your readings that you do for yourself so much more depth. Another thing I wanted to mention was the value of asking useful questions. Now, this is something that I've spoken about several times on the channel, and I know that not everybody is going to agree with me on this, but I do not find straightforward yes or no questions to be expansive and helpful and nurturing and nourishing and all that good stuff. For obvious reasons, okay, you're shutting yourself down as soon as you've got your answer. There's no why, there's no how, there's no how can I move forward from this, or, you know, what is my role. It's yes or no, so you get your answer and that's it. You kind of shut yourself off from further exploration, which I think is a great shame. So I don't do yes or no questions, and I discourage my clients from doing them, from asking them. Certainly don't do them for myself. I know that I know the answer. I know the answer is within. You know, I don't need the cards to tell me the answer. I need the cards to facilitate my pathway towards the answer I already know is inherent within. And I think that's how tarot should be approached. Some good useful questions would be things like, you know, why do I feel the way that I feel now, and how can I move beyond it? That kind of thing. I think, how can I be expansive in this situation? How can I be useful in this situation? That kind of thing. How do I surrender my personal power, and how can I best honour and support myself? What am I overlooking in this situation? What do I need to know about this situation? What should I pursue? How can I facilitate forward motion? What am I overlooking? How can I strengthen my boundaries? How can I know my limitations? How can I own my authentic voice? Advice for healing, you know, advice for being proactive, and really allow yourself to be expansive then, because you've given yourself so much meat on that bone. You know, yes and no is like a McDonald's, whereas questions that start with how and what, those questions are like the roast dinner in tarot, okay? They're not junk food, they're going to feed you, they're going to give you long-term nourishment. That's how I see it. Are you asking the same question over and over again? Because guys, if you are, you need to put the cards down, and you know it. And this is something that can happen, and it causes a lot of confusion. It's really not a good look. So, you know, I would sincerely suggest that if you are looking for a very specific answer from the cards, and you're getting yourself all muddled because you're doing reading after reading, then it's really time to change that up. It's time for a little tarot break. And a very long time ago, when I first started the Four Queens blog, I actually wrote a post about what to do if you find that you're addicted to tarot. And I will link that below for you guys if you would like to read that. One question I would advise asking yourself is, are you always disappointed by the readings that you give for yourself? Or in fact, are you always delighted by the results you get when you read for yourself? Because I think either one can sometimes be a little bit of a sign that you are not working hard enough to push your boundaries, or to challenge yourself, or to really get some meat off the bone. Not all of the time. Sometimes you just feel reassured by a tarot reading for yourself, or sometimes you feel refreshed and rejuvenated and like you know what to do from there on. And that's fine. But what I'm really talking about are times where you turn the cards over and you feel instantly as though everything that you want is going to come to pass. Like, for example, if you're asking tarot, will he come back to me, or will he leave that woman and be with me? Which I seriously suggest you do not, because it's a yes or no question, and it places more focus on somebody else rather than placing focus on you. You are the only person whose actions you can change, so of course it's logical that the tarot reading should be based around you. But I know a lot of people use tarot for these questions, and if you do, then more power to you. But if you're asking that question and you're constantly disappointed by the answer, or you're constantly delighted by the answer, and you're convinced that he's going to like leave his wife tomorrow and be with you, then I think that's probably some sign of an unhealthy attachment to the cards, because the cards are so different and their messages are so deep and profound, and every single spread gives off such a different energy and such a different vibe, that if you're getting the same emotional response to every single card you draw and every single spread you do, it's possible that you are really overlooking the central messages of each card, and instead kind of really placing your own message onto them, placing what you desire onto them. So that might be a consideration for some of you. Really, it's about looking to have your viewpoint challenged, or looking to encourage yourself and be proactive in your situation. So sometimes, yes, we will draw tarot cards to be reassured and to be comforted, but we should be reassured and comforted by the messages, for example, of things like our signature strengths, the things that we can use to get through something, the powers that we have to actually change something or to heal. Tarot should always be giving us that feeling that we want to put our best foot forward, that we have a sense of self-belief, that we have a sense of desire to move on through a difficulty. And we use the cards as tools to kind of show us the way and help us get in touch with what our signature strengths and our core abilities are and how we can really move on and grow. You know, we should be looking to be challenged sometimes. We should be looking to see things from a different angle. I think that's for the best. But of course, everybody has their own ideas. These are just some more considerations that I thought I would put forth about how to read tarot healthily and happily for yourself. Much love, guys. Blessed be, and enjoy the tarot journey.